Welcome back to PedalBox. This time we're dealing with this massive panel gap between the roofline and the engine cover, which admittedly is pretty big right now because the engine cover's off, but we'll put that back on and show you how we hope to fix it with this piece of rubber seal. So this is the panel gap we're going to try and do something about, but there are actually two panel gaps here. There is the aesthetic one between the roof panel and the engine cover, which at this stage there isn't very much we can do about because the clearance between this as it rolls around is just far too close. We are not good enough, we should clearly be better. The one we can do something about is between the engine cover and the drip tray underneath, the little gutter that runs all the way across here and then flows down the side and dumps out of the back, because we want to keep as much water out of the engine bay as possible, because we have things like the ECU in there and plenty of pockets across the top of the engine that would ordinarily be covered up by the bonnet, nice and close, and not allow much water to actually get onto and pool. So at the moment there is a clear line of sight from this panel past the tray all the way down onto the top of the engine, and that's no good. And we've been thinking for at least 12 months on my part how to try and deal with this, probably a bit longer realistically. We've been looking at ways to fix this, but I've been actively thinking about it for about a year now, because last winter we had this problem of water getting down and pooling in the top of the inlet manifold area around all of the plugs and everything else, had to keep drying it out. So I've been thinking about ways we can actually fix this once and for all. So now you can see the drip channel as it stands right now a little bit better since we've taken the cover off again. It's quite wide at the edges, but in the middle where it bows apart the most, it's actually much smaller, which is really annoying. We could have done with this being significantly bigger. We could fix this by welding on a piece of steel and making it at least another ½ inch longer over the edge of the engine bay, but it's a lot to weld in. We've got all of this stuff in. We don't want to put weld spatter and grinding dust and everything else over the top of, so that is very much a last resort. But we have previously considered it. Instead, we're going to use this rubber seal, which has this fin that sticks off one end, and we're going to put this in this way round so that when the cover comes down, it presses up against this side, and any water that theoretically gets into that gap, or will get into that gap really, will land on it, get brushed across, down the channels and out the back of the car. That's the plan. In order to keep this on, because there is very little material for it to actually fit over, we're going to use the same technique we've done in a couple of other places on the panels and basically stitch this in with some steel wire, because this doesn't really need to come off. As long as this stays on the car and works, it never needs to be removed. We can mask over it if we need to paint, whatever. So we've got to get a little bit of lacquer on this, a little bit more paint as well, just to make sure that this is sealed up, and then we can install this and move on to the next bit we need to fix on another area of the car. So we've got all the holes drilled in this lip now, and we only snapped, I think, 4 drill bits, which is worse than I'd hoped, but better than I expected after the first 2. So all of these little holes are about 2 inches, 2.5 inches on center. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't drill through the rubber into the metal because the varying height getting this in place, it was too difficult, and that was one of the reasons I snapped the first drill bit. So as we go along, we're going to have to align this to the hole underneath, punch a hole through the rubber on both sides, and then feed the metal through. This is the wire we're using. It is the same 1-ish millimeter stuff we've used before, and I'm going to feed it through both sides. This is going to be interlocking all the way across as we go through, which we've not done before. I wouldn't say I'm completely convinced it's going to work, but I think it's going to be much more required for this piece of rubber than any of the other ones. So here goes nothing. Well, double stitching this is not going well, as you can probably tell, so we're going to get one side in and come back to it, because we at least want to make sure that this is mounted to some degree. And thus far, only having one stitch in, this side is really well attached, so we might not need to faff around and get both of these stitched from both sides. I'll just try not to slide and smash my face into the car as well. So join us in a bit when this is either a great success or a colossal failure. Well, as you can tell, it's now dark. This took us the better part of 2 hours to get done, trying to fish those wires through the holes, line them all up. It wasn't as easy as it could have been to just drill the 2 holes in the rubber and then drop it on and fish it through as it could have been. I definitely preferred drilling everything in one go, but it just wasn't going to work on here with the curve of that metal underneath. So I definitely don't want to do this again, and with that in mind, we want to preserve a little bit more of the longevity of this, and for that, we're going to use some silicone sealant and run a bead down the top, sealing all of the holes that we've just drilled where those wires come through, blanking all of those wires off. I'm pretty sure they're stainless steel, but just in case they're not, I don't want them to rust, so covering them in silicone will at least preserve them that little bit longer and mean that I can avoid doing this job for a few more years, hopefully. So tomorrow, we're going to show you how this actually looks with the engine cover on. We can barely see what it looks like now, so you stand no chance of seeing. So we will pick this up in the morning and hopefully everything will be fine.
Well, I'd love to tell you it's now tomorrow morning and we've got loads of hours of work ahead of us, but unfortunately it's actually afternoon that we're starting today because we spent all morning nursing our backs and various other joints from the incredible pain that we ended up in as a result of our movements to get those drill holes through and everything, because that was an absolute nightmare. But we did at least get some silicone on last night before turning in, and it seems to have set quite well. There's no cracks in it, none of it's shrunk. It looks like we've got a nice, smooth, consistent seal all the way across. We also had the engine bay cover on last night. We put it on just to try and help protect everything and keep this at least vaguely protected from the flapping tarpaulin that we put over this at night. And everything seems to have stayed in place okay. There were a couple of dips in it. There's some reinforcement struts in the cover that end up pressing into the seal, but despite that, it seems to be unhurt. So now, with the silicone having had some time to set, we can get the engine bay cover on for real, bolt it in, move it around a bit, and then once it's closed, we can wash over here with like the garden hose or something and see if any water ends up in the engine bay. Because if it does, obviously we'll have to rework things. So we've got it all bolted back together for the first time with the gas struts back on. I've popped my phone in there as a camera, we've got some light. We're going to run it down and see if we can see what the seal looks like from the inside. Yeah, from the top it looks great. We've changed our mind a little bit. We're going to use a watering can rather than a garden hose, just so it's a bit more controlled and we don't wet the entire driveway. What's it look like from there? I'm not seeing anything coming out the side of the car, but I think it's because the drain channel runs all the way down internally. Oh yeah, no, it's coming out the back. It's yeah, so we're draining out as we hoped, just on the back corner of the car here, but where these two grills join. So as far as we can tell, the experiment has been a complete success. There is a tiny bit of water that leaks near the sides. I mentioned a minute ago we've got these support struts in the corner of the structure here, and they deflect the seal a bit, and some water does leak out past them, but it's not a lot compared to the amount that we saw running out the back of the car. And I know you're probably thinking a watering can isn't really the same as, you know, rain or like especially driving rain when you're out on the road and things like that. But really, when we're out on the road and up at speed, we should have a pretty good airstream over the car, and I'd be surprised if much water's coming in here when we're driving. As near as I can guess, and I admit this is a guess, most of what this is actually going to have to deal with is rain when it's parked, which is just going to be hitting the car, running into there slowly, and having more than enough time to run around the side. It's not going to be like a high-pressure jet or anything. Note to self, don't pressure wash this. But yeah, no, we'll call that a total win. And just as a quick note, in case you're worried about the giant hole in our roof that is the air intake here, that obviously goes directly into the turbo and into the engine, we do have a drain hole in there. And although we haven't got a hose coming off of it to take it out of the car anywhere yet, we are going to add one before it goes on the road. Let's have another look at our splitter. And normally when we put the car to bed at night, we throw a tarpaulin over it, and it's got a bunch of eyelets all around that we hoop bungee cords in to secure it down over the car. Works pretty well, but it does sort of flop around in the wind a bit. And in the storm we had a few weeks ago at the time of filming, as the tarp was moving around and obviously pulling the bungee cords around a bit with it, this one managed to saw a good like 6 to 8 inches through, just a straight line through our splitter. Now obviously the splitter was already mangled, like this doesn't change any of our plans. We're still planning to go to Easy Composites and grab one of their carbon fibre, like honeycomb composite splitter kits. I just think it's kind of interesting just how even worse than I thought this plywood was. It's kind of incredible that bungee, which is like, was it like a rubber core, I think, and some regular like rope material around the outside, managed to just cut through it. Really quite impressive. And you can help fund that splitter kit purchase by jumping on shop.pedalbox.show, where you can buy any of the beanie hats, hoodies, etc. that, as usual, I'm not wearing, or this tasteful mug, which, also as usual, I've been drinking a lot of tea out of to keep warm the last few days. You can also jump on patreon.com/pedalboxshow, support us there from as little as $1 a month. Everything we get on Patreon does go into the cars. There's a huge number of parts of this that have all come out of the Patreon pot, and there are even some specific parts that we can even like kind of pin a name to. We really appreciate all the support that we get, because obviously this is just a spare time project for Adrian and I. We've got no sponsorships or anything, so it's really, really awesome that just through the support of the community, we're able to build something like this. We really, really do appreciate every pound you give us. Or if you work at Easy Composites, you could always just send us one of those splitter kits. That'd be awesome. Anyway, as the sun disappears and my feet get cold and my stomach starts rumbling, it's time for us to draw this weekend to a close. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time.